Hi, everybody. These are notes on the orientation to the human body. As we've already discussed in class, this is anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is the study of the structure and the shape of the body and its parts. So you're going to be looking at the physical, what the body looks like, and what are the names of all the structures and what are the names of the parts of the body. And then we're also going to be studying physiology, which is how the body works and how its parts work and function together. This can be anything from chemical messages to different cell communication to hormones. So there's lots of different things that go into both anatomy and physiology, and we'll be studying both together. You can't really study physiology without studying anatomy first. When we talk about anatomy, there's going to be different levels that we study. So the first level is gross anatomy, which is large structures. They're very easy to observe. Things like organs are going to be your gross anatomy, the stomach, the intestines, the liver. Those would all be things we can see. They're easily observable, and they're very large. They're visible to the naked eye. There's also microanatomy or microscopic anatomy, and these are structures that cannot be seen with the naked eye. So things like the lining of the stomach, if we go in and look at it with a microscope level, you can see that there's all different rivets and valleys and areas there that you can't see when you're looking at the stomach on the gross anatomy level. So these can only be viewed with a microscope, not with the naked eye. So your body has some necessary life functions. The first is to maintain boundaries. So you always want a boundary between your own body and your environment. And the skin, as well as some mucous membranes, provide this boundary for us. The next is movement. So in order to get away from a predator, to get away from something that might be dangerous, we need to be able to move. So that would be locomotion. Our muscles and our skeleton help us to move, as well as the energy we get from what we eat. And we're also going to need to be able to move substances throughout our body. So this would come into play when we're talking about digestion and water balance in the body, as well as salts and proteins and hormones. All these things need to move within our body. Responsiveness is very important. So we need to be able to sense changes to the environment and as well as react to them. These would include things like being sweaty when you go outside, or putting your hand on a hot stove and immediately removing it. Those are very important. The next is digestion. So when we eat, we need to be able to break down the nutrients in our food and absorb them into our body. Otherwise, they're not going to be helpful. Metabolism is kind of a part of that. So metabolism includes any chemical reaction that happens within the body. It allows us to break complex molecules into smaller ones, like we would with some of our food. And we can also build larger molecules from smaller ones by making proteins and making hormones. We can sometimes make our own vitamins. This metabolism produces energy that we're going to use. So if we need to move, we need energy, and metabolism helps us do that. And metabolism is regulated by hormones. So which complex molecules are being broken down and which are being created is all regulated by what hormones are being received. And we also need to have excretion, eliminating waste, and those wastes can be removed in the urine or the feces. And these are waste from the metabolic reactions that occur within the body. Reproduction is necessary because otherwise our species would cease to exist. This occurs on the cellular level, so we need to reproduce cells. Our skin sloughs off, the lining of your esophagus sloughs off as food goes in. So those need to be able to be reproduced, as well as reproducing an entire organism through having a baby. And that's what produces our future generation. And we also need to be able to grow. We don't want to stay the size of a baby our whole lives. So we need to have new cells and increase in the size of the cell itself, as well as the number of cells that we have in our body. So some needs we have for survival are nutrients. We need these nutrients in order to have energy, in order to build cells. And these would include organic molecules like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, which are another word for fats. Lipids is a scientific word for fats. Vitamins and minerals. We also need oxygen. Oxygen is required for chemical reactions, and a lot of how we get our energy through cell respiration requires oxygen. We definitely need water. Water makes up 60 to 80% of our body weight. It's the most abundant chemical in the human body. And again, it helps those metabolic reactions, those chemical reactions to occur. We need a stable body temperature, which is 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's important because if it's too high or too low, the proteins and the molecules in our body are not going to function correctly. And the atmospheric pressure around us has to be appropriate for us to be able to breathe and get gas in and out of our bodies. So probably the most important thing when we're talking about physiology is the term homeostasis. Homeostasis is the maintenance of a stable internal environment. And this means that everything in our body is going to be staying relatively the same, whether we're talking about temperature, pH, the amount of water we have in our bodies. Those all need to stay the same in order to be healthy and be able to survive. So it's this dynamic state of equilibrium. We're in equilibrium, but things are changing around us all the time. So in order to stay with our environment, we need to be changing ourselves, but we're actually keeping our body the same. A good example of this is, again, when you go outside on a really hot day. You get sweaty in order to keep your body temperature where it is. So this is necessary to sustain life. And when we get into something called homeostatic imbalance, it means that something in our body is out of whack. We're not able to keep it in the right range. So it could be your pH level, it could be the amount of fats that build up in your brain, and this results in disease. So how will we maintain homeostasis? First, there's going to be some sort of stimulus. And it's going to be a seesaw. It goes back and forth. So we're going to be in balance, and then our body's going to bring us back into homeostasis. So first we have a stimulus of some sort, and that produces some sort of change in our bodies. And the receptor is going to detect that change. Then we're going to have some input, some information sent along to a control center. So that receptor is going to detect the change and send information to a control center in your body. And this happens in many different cases throughout many different parts of your body. Then we have the output. What is the effector going to do? So what's going to change because of this information that's been given to us? And then finally, we're going to have a response, and that will bring us back into homeostasis where we need to be. So again, the body communicates both through your nervous system and through your endocrine system, through nerves and hormones. So we have that receptor, and it's going to be a response to a change in the environment. And that is going to send information to the control center, whichever control center that is, depending on what change in the environment occurs. The control center is going to determine what point your body should be at, like what body temperature should you have, what should the pH level of your blood be, how many blood cells should you have. It's going to analyze the information that's coming in through the receptor, and it's going to determine what response is appropriate. And then the effector is going to provide a means for a response to the stimulus. So there's two types of feedback, and what we were talking about with the receptor, control center, and effector are feedback. It's a feedback system, a feedback loop. So the first type, the most common type, is negative feedback. And this is going to be most of your homeostatic control mechanisms are going to be some sort of negative feedback. So how you control homeostasis is mostly through negative feedback. And what it does is it shuts off that original stimulus or reduces its intensity, just like a household thermostat. So you're going to set the temperature, and if it changes, you're going to use this negative feedback system to maintain the temperature where it should be. And finally, we have positive feedback as well. So positive feedback is going to take this original stimulus and push it even further. Two examples of positive feedback in the body are blood clotting and the birth of a baby. So if you think about the birth of a baby and positive feedback, as soon as you feel those labor pains, your body's going to tell you to intensify it. And then when you feel more labor pains and more contractions in your uterus, your body's going to send hormones, and those are going to intensify. And they're going to keep intensifying and keep contracting your uterus and dilating your cervix until the baby is born. So that's an example of a positive feedback loop that's in your body. So those are our notes for today. Please write down any questions that you have, and we'll go over them in class next time. Thanks.